And Governor Ron DeSantis could soon officially announce his bid for presidency. He's expected to announce it tomorrow. A pollster tells us it's a strange time for this announcement, considering how far he trails Trump in the polls. Now, as for President Biden, his approval ratings have fluctuated quite a bit over the course of his time in the White House. And over the past 2 weeks particularly, a Rasmussen report poll shows they plummeted again. We have the head pollster to break down the factors around this. All right, joining me now is Mark Mitchell, the head pollster at Rasmussen Reports. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time. I want to start with Biden's overall approval ratings. What's the overall picture here? Now, your organization did a report saying that most people actually forget the big picture. So I want to know your take on what do you think are some of the key trends that we've seen with his ratings and the overall big picture?
Well, people should absolutely look at our numbers, I think, more than anyone else's, because we're the only firm out there that's still doing a daily Biden approval number. Now, this winter, his approval actually got up to about 50% in our numbers, and people really were trying to figure out why. And there's a bunch of reasons why that is. One of them, like I said, is because we're polling every day. And another is because he's on the back half of his term. Voters don't think that he's in charge. They think others are calling the shots. He's less of a threat with a split House of Congress. And quite frankly, I thought that there were reasons his approval rating should be up. But I'll tell you what's happened over the last 2 weeks is that his approval just absolutely plummeted again. We had him down to 41% in today's numbers. And it's actually driven by an utter collapse in approval among independents and even Democrats. Democrats were keeping him up really most of the last 6 months. He had a Democrat approval rating in the high 70s. Now it's down to about 70% today, and his approval among independents is in the low 30s, which, as you know, is just catastrophically low. So those aren't great numbers, and of course they could always change, but it's tough to see him doing great in an election in the current political climate.
One of the top issues that your organization wrote an article on is that the voters are concerned about the economy. That's one of their top issues. Now, considering the whole debt ceiling drama that's playing out right now here in D.C., from the polling that you've seen, has this issue caused voters to lose trust in the Republican Party with regard to the debt ceiling? Or has it shown that voters are more likely to trust them because they trust in that fiscal path that they're putting forward right now?
That's a tough one to answer. I would say across the board, voters trust Republicans on really everything right now. For the 2022 election, voters told us that kitchen table economic issues, the job market, gas prices, inflation, were their top concerns, and that's what brought them to the ballot box. But then coming into this year, I mean, depending on the issue, Republicans lead from 1 or 2 points on things that Democrats should be winning on. I think they only lose on Social Security and the environment, and they're up as high as a 13-point lead on things like the border. So depending on how bad Biden is on an issue, Republicans have a massive lead. The problems Republicans have is that Republicans voters really do not have trust in their establishment party whatsoever. Coming out of the 2022 election, they told us when we asked that they wanted to see new leaders, and they didn't get them. And they were really confused by what was happening in Congress with, Speaker McCarthy getting elected. And then also Ronna McDaniel was Republican voters' third pick for RNC chair behind Harmeet Dillon and Mike Lindell. So, all of these ways that we test, Republicans, I think, lack faith in their Republican leadership. We even asked a question about whether they perceive their leaders to be winners as much as Democrats. And across the board, people say no. So that's really the challenge.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting that you point that out. And that leads me to what I wanted to actually end this interview on was how the Republican primary, how that crowded field is looking right now with regards to the ratings. So you just mentioned that Trump is among the highest. Is he the highest candidate with regards to polling?
There really was some Trump weakness at the end of the year. And reading into all the questions we asked, I think probably part of it is that Republicans expected a better turnout. And Trump really wasn't there. And then he did a few tone-deaf things like launching NFTs and supporting McCarthy, which was not popular among Republicans. But then really since East Palestine, since he started doing town halls, since he started doing campaign events, his numbers, he got down to, it was almost 10 points apart among Republicans between him and DeSantis. I think he was in the high 40s, DeSantis was in the high 30s. That was a little over 3 months ago. And since then, Trump has had a complete turnaround. he now leads DeSantis 62% to 17% among Republicans. So it just seems to me to be a really strange, time for the DeSantis campaign to think about declaring, because he's had an absolute collapse in the numbers. Nobody else gets close. Everybody else that we've tested is in the mid single digits, low single digits. But the one thing I look at and say that, these people probably don't have a shot is that among Republicans, when you pair Trump up against DeSantis, I think we had Nikki Haley in there, Mike Pence, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Asa Hutchinson. Some other candidate only gets 2%. So Republicans look at that slate, and between really Trump and DeSantis, they see two good candidates and don't see a reason to need anybody else.